Hello, and welcome to my channel. Try This is a series breaking down a certain game or playstyle of a game. Today we're going to be talking Commander and breaking down Miirym Sentinel Wyrm. The video is broken down into chapters which you can find in the description or in the timeline. I'll be briefly covering Miirym and then some win conditions and how we'll get there. I'll talk about some mana base and card draw strategies. I'll discuss other synergistic cards in the deck and why I think they'll help. I'll cover some other cards I cut from my example list, why they didn't fit my list but they might fit yours. And finally, I'll move on to some budget suggestions for the deck. If you enjoy this content, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. It really helps other viewers discover the content I produce and is a great way to show support. With that said, let's dive in. Miirym is a 6/6 dragon spirit that costs 3 green, blue, red that has flying and ward 2. He also has, whenever another non-token dragon enters the battlefield under your control, create a token that's a copy of it, except that token isn't legendary if that dragon is legendary. Miirym is a huge dragon engine commander that can create explosive turns to snowball out of control. It is actually quite insane the kind of value we can get with this commander. Being an ETB ability, we can also double it up or abuse this effect with classic cards like Panharmonicon or the new Thassa. In testing this commander, I found Miirym to be a huge threat consistently once I ramped a bit. Dragons are pretty expensive, and if Miirym gets countered or removed, it can really slow us down. Thankfully, there are a few ways to cheat out our dragons, and there are plenty of powerful dragons now that generate all the mana we need. Similar to my Thrakkus list, our main strategy is going to be beating down our opponents with dragons. Instead of doubling up their power, we're just going to double up the number of dragons we have. This list is going to be very similar to the Thrakkus list, just with splashing in some blue cards to help out our strategy. I'm running Hellkite Tyrant as an alternate win condition for the deck. Being able to double up this dragon allows us to steal even more artifacts and make the win condition redundant against removal. Miirym really enables our other ping effects as alternate win conditions. Dragon Tempest, Scourge of Valkus, and Terror of the Peaks can be incredibly effective in this deck. Casting a dragon gives us multiple instances of each of these effects. In the case of the 2 dragons, we even have multiple of them that trigger. Starting off as the auto includes in Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, and Thematic Compass. I've always found Thematic Compass to be a reliable card at any point in the game. It can help ensure land drops in early to mid game, then flip into the strictly better Maze of Ith to protect us from Voltron commanders and other problem creatures. Cultivate, 3 Visits, and Steve are all great early game cards to advance our mana base. 3 Visits can get our Tri-land or any of our shock lands if needed, which makes it a very flexible ramp card. Similarly, Nature's Lore, Sky Shroud Claim, and Tempt with Discovery can also get non-basic lands for us. Tempt with Discovery is always a nice card to run as we can get utility lands and start some interaction with our opponents. Dragon's Horde, Birds of Paradise, and Ornithopter of Paradise will all ramp us and can generate whatever mana we need. The Horde can also draw us cards. With Miirym doubling up our dragons, we should get more than enough counters on this card throughout the game. Sword of Hearth and Home is also here to get some extra lands for us onto the battlefield. Being able to flicker our dragons is huge with this deck also. We can abuse ETB effects with this equipment and create even more tokens of some dangerous creatures like Terror of the Peaks. The Great Henge is once again here as our king of mana rocks. It should be pretty easy to cast with all of our large creatures and can do basically everything we want in Magic. Growing our creatures, giving us mana, gaining us life, and drawing us cards all in one artifact is very powerful. Ganax and Goldspan Dragon can both provide us with a ton of treasures. With our deck abusing ETB effects, Ganax can actually get out of control and propel us to generate enough mana for anything in our hand. Old Gnawbone and Cloth can also generate a ton of mana for us. These creatures by themselves, let alone doubling up both of them, can generate enough mana for us to cast whatever we need also. I'm running Herald's Horn and Urza's Incubator as 2 cards to reduce the cost of our dragons. Miirym is pretty expensive to cast along with most of our dragons, so we need some effects to make them cheaper and start jamming out dragons onto the field. These 2 cards are very effective at this, and the Horn can also give us some card advantage throughout the game. Belby's Portal and Monster Manual aren't really mana related, but offer cheap ways to get our dragons out at instant speed. Being able to get essentially 2 dragons with this effect is amazing and makes attacking into us very scary for our opponents. For draw effects, I'm running some staples in Rhystic Study and Kindred Discovery. Rhystic Study needs no introduction, and Kindred Discovery fits so well into any tribal list. With all the ETB effects we're abusing and Miirym also doubling up our dragons, Kindred Discovery will provide us with a ton of value throughout the game. It doesn't care if the creatures are tokens or not, so each dragon we cast will at least draw us 2 cards. Bident of Thassa and Greater Good are also here to draw us cards. With most of our creatures having flying, we should have plenty of opportunities to draw cards with the Bident, especially with doubling up our dragons. Greater Good fits really well in this deck also. With most of our dragons being large enough to draw more than we need to discard, we can sacrifice any extra tokens we have for draws. Dragonborn Champion and Temur Ascendancy will wrap up our card draw section. Most of our creatures are large enough to trigger the champion, including our commander. Being a dragon will also get doubled up to get some extra draws. Temur Ascendancy will also get triggered by most of our dragons, which synergizes with our ETB sub-theme and also gives our creatures haste. Starting off is Panharmonicon and Thassa Deep Dwelling. These cards can abuse Miiryms and any other ETB effects in our deck. Flickering any of our dragons with Thassa can generate extra tokens for blockers also. Uvara Hellkite and Dragon Broodmother will provide extra dragons for us. Doubling up either of these can create explosive board states on their own. Each Hellkite triggers separately and will easily carry us to victory. In addition to Dragon Tempest and Temur Ascendancy are Fires of Yavimaya and Rhythm of the Wild to give our dragons haste. Having so many haste effects with the ability to jam out all these dragons will ensure we are a constant threat for our opponents. Rhythm of the Wild also makes our creatures uncounterable, which is great since many of our creatures are expensive to cast and difficult to recur. Balefire Dragon, Steel Hellkite, and Scourge of the Throne are all effective dragons that duplicate with our commander's ability. Balefire and the Hellkite can really keep the board under control. Multiple of them can give us some very versatile removal effects that control the board state. Having multiple Scourge of the Thrones will let us juggle our combat damage to get multiple combats. Spark Double and both Shakashimas targeting our commander will not only double up Miirym's ability, but they'll make tokens when they enter. These clone effects all enter as a copy, and being non-token dragons will actually trigger our commander's ability, making a token copy of them. We'll end up with 3 copies of our commander to snowball the rest of our deck. Any non-token dragon that hits our field will make 3 copies of itself. This is such insane value, and flickering either of the copies can make more and more and more of them. Our board state could likely blow up, especially with the imposter being able to bounce itself. Dragoseth Maw of Flames can be an effective removal creature on its own, but even more so with multiple copies. We can burn down our opponents or their problem creatures that control the board. Sarkhan the Masterless is also a great include in this deck. He creates more dragons for us, but more importantly, he pings creatures swinging at himself or us. With all the dragons we can produce, this should provide an effective defensive ability for us. The cutting room floor is where I talk about some cards around or over $10 at the time of recording that I cut from my list for various reasons but are worth mentioning the run. Though these cards didn't find a home in my list, they might find a home in yours. First off is Purphoros, God of the Forge. With all the dragons we produce and our ETB sub-theme, it would make sense to run it in this list. I wanted to focus on dragons for my list, and I thought I could burn my opponents using just them, so I cut this god from my list. However, if you are going to be playing into the ETB theme more, then I would suggest adding him. Helm of the Host is another good way to copy some of our dragons. Miirym is far more effective than this card, but it's another good way to copy Miirym himself. Spark Double and the Sakashimas was enough for me and more mana efficient, but all the same this is a copy effect that sticks around and can be changed to other creatures we have. Next is Dockside Extortionist and the Ancient Copper Dragon is 2 more cards to make treasures for us. Either would be a good include as Dockside plays into our sub-theme and the dragon plays into our commander's ability. I didn't think I needed more ramp effects in this deck. I have a pretty aggressive mana package to start with, and these 2 cards just felt like overkill. However, both are solid cards if you're looking for more mana production. Doubling Season and Parallel Lives are 2 cards that double up our commander's effect. They were easy cuts for me because of how powerful these cards tend to be. Miirym was very aggressive and I could easily explode without these cards, so I decided not to include them to lower the power of my deck. I already have Panharmonicon to double up Miirym's triggers and some other effects. All the same, I think any token doubling effect would really synergize with any Miirym list. Clever Impersonator and Clone are 2 cards that can replace some of our more expensive clone creatures. The Impersonator is also a flexible creature that can enter as whatever non-land card we want on the battlefield. Though these cards don't dodge legend roll and we'd need to sacrifice them, Miirym would still make non-legendary copies when they enter. Many of our dragons are non-legendary though, so there should still be plenty of good options to choose from. Impact Tremors and Conjurer's Closet are 2 more cards that fit with our ETB sub-theme. I originally cut the closet for Thassa as she's indestructible, and I wanted to save the extra slot for something else. However, it is a good budget version of her that would help flicker our dragons. Dragonlord's Servant and Dragonspeaker Shaman are 2 budget versions of Urza's Incubator and Herald's Horn. These cards fit into our tribe very well and are very budget friendly. As creatures they're more vulnerable, but I think they're still worth running regardless. Warstorm Surge and Thunderbreak Regen are 2 more cards that can burn our opponents for damage. Warstorm Surge is just a budget version of Terror of the Peaks. With all the dragons we'll have entering the battlefield, I think this is a solid card in this deck to replace literally anything that doesn't fit your budget. The Regent by itself isn't super threatening, but having multiple of them can really punish our opponents who try to target our dragons. Atarka and Savage Ventmaw are 2 great budget dragons that would fit this list. Atarka can really push our aggressive deck by giving everything double strike. Savage Ventmaw is a cheap dragon to generate mana for us and can easily replace expensive cards like Goldspan Dragon. Astral Dragon and Lathis are some more dragons that are welcome in any dragon list. Both will create a ton of tokens for us. Making copies of Astral Dragon doubles up its ETB effect, and we can actually make lands into dragons with it. It's actually a pretty cool card, and it's the first on my list to slide into this deck if I find a slot. I think 8 mana is a lot, even for a pretty powerful effect like this, but with an aggressive mana base, I think it would probably be fine to include. Vivian and Leyline of Anticipation are some cards that give our dragons flash. I think that would be welcome in this deck as we can just set up on our opponent's turn then swing out. This would help our haste effects out and play into our very aggressive deck. I think flash in general just really ups the power of your deck, and Miirym is pretty powerful already, so before adding these cards, consider how it would fit with your pod. To go along with them is Tidal Barracuda and Renari Merchant of Marvels. These 2 creatures can give our dragons flash, and Renari can also be doubled up for redundancy using Miirym's ability. I didn't cover every card I have for this deck or every suggestion I had for Miirym, so if you'd like to see the rest, check out the deck list in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, please consider clicking the like button and subscribing to the channel. Comment below on cards you think synergize well with this commander, and if you have any suggestions for commanders to build in the future. Thank you so much for watching, good luck, and have fun.